Well, welcome everyone. My name is Mary Kay Dobrovolny. I am a Sister of Mercy and have moved around a little bit. So I've been part of Dignity chapters in a wide variety of locations. Currently, I live in San Diego, and I'm on the leadership team of Families with Dignity. Families with Dignity is a new caucus to Dignity USA. So I want to take this opportunity. They're hosting this workshop. So as the hosts, I want to take a brief opportunity to give you a little bit of background on Families with Dignity, since many of you don't yet know about us. In March of 2020, this organization, formerly known as Fortunate Families Detroit, got a ban and bar letter from the Archdiocese of Detroit. And we were told that we could no longer identify as a Catholic organization and meet anywhere in the Archdiocese. And that was a bit of an instigus for us to have an empowered voice. And that got us in a little bit of trouble with our namesake. And so we reached out to Dignity USA and found a warm welcome and a warm embrace, and have been part of the Dignity USA family in this past year and a bit. And we are very happy to be part of Dignity USA. So this Families with Dignity is the host of this workshop entitled Parents, Kids, and Grandfolks, the LGBTQ Family Challenge. So we're delighted that you've chosen this workshop. A few public service announcements. The session is being recorded. So if you have your video on and show up on the screen, that will be part of the recording. So if you do not want to be part of the recording, please just turn off your video. The session can have a maximum of 20 people on camera at any time, including the panelists. Will always stay on the screen. So if you turn your camera on, it's likely that you will be visible only for part of the session and not the entirety of it, as the numbers may exceed 20. If at any time you would like to ask a question, please find the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of the screen and type in your question there. Lizzie will monitor a bit if it gets dropped into the chat and help us out. But if you can find the Q&A tab, that will be helpful into the future. And then you can, as you saw in the keynote, you can give a thumbs up to the questions that are posted to indicate that this is a question that you would like to see discussed. And the more thumbs up the question has, the higher on the list it will be for likelihood to be asked. So with that, I want to turn our attention to our fantastic panelists. Thank you very much to April and Miles, Kelly, and Ricky for coming and being part of this conversation, leading us in the conversation, and sharing your stories with us as we all grapple with realities of being family in the LGBTQ community, the gifts and challenges, and what it really means. So with that, a few words of introduction. April and Miles are members of Dignity Boston. They're foster parents since 2019, millennials who are members of the LGBTQ community and trying to raise their children with progressive ideals of faith. So they'll be telling some stories in that, and I invite them to begin, and I'll introduce Kelly and Ricky after they've shared a few reflections.
Hi, thanks Mary Kay for the introduction. My name is Miles and my pronouns are they, he.
And my name is April and my pronouns are she, her.
So we're going to share a little bit about our story as foster parents. So when April and I started dating and also after we were married, we talked a lot about having children, and it was something we both really wanted. When we started, sort of committed to the process of having kids, we worked with a fertility clinic for a period of time. And we worked, with the appointments and everything for, a couple of months, I think. And then, as is the nature of those sort of things, we felt ourselves overwhelmed and stopped and paused and told ourselves, let's just sort of hold here and think about what to do next. So just around that time, I think by the grace of God, really, the Duddy Burks, who many of you know well, started fostering a family member, a little one who was 2 months old. And that sort of was our God waving a flag at us or trying to get our attention. And we really felt called to be foster parents. We knew that we could, it wouldn't be easy, but that we could probably offer a loving home to little ones that needed it.
So we had a lot of conversations around foster care, and we had from the very beginning in thinking about that as an option. Miles was a little bit conflicted and hesitant on the whole issue just because they work in the mental health system and they have seen a lot of mental health issues come as a result of the foster care system and all that children go through during that time. And it is really challenging to deal with. And so we wanted to be able to be the best parents, and we didn't know that we had the skills for that. So we talked and we decided that, yes, we're going to go forward. And I was really excited about that. My family has done foster care in the past, and although I knew that it would be challenging, I knew that I also didn't want to do it with anyone but Miles, so I knew to do it.
Yeah, I think I sort of flipped my perspectives from, I don't know if I can do this, to if I can do it at work, I think I can do it at home too. So we really got behind foster care. We did like the quick version of getting licensed because we were so excited. We started in, I think, February. We were licensed by July, and that was 2019. And I think 3 weeks later, we had our first kiddos come into our care. One was a newborn. We got to pick him up from the hospital, which was really a special experience. And the other child was his brother, his 2.5-year-old brother. And we were on the really steep learning curve that probably every parent has when they have their first kids, except we had two. And luckily, we had tons of support from family and friends and the social workers. And we really learned a lot from that process, not just how to be parents, but how to be parents to little children with trauma, how to navigate the healthcare system as not the legal parents of children, which is pretty tricky. And we also learned about how to work with families. So we became really close with the boys' parents who were going through some challenges with mental health and substance use. And we're still in touch with them to this day. Kids were reunified after 10 months. But I think it was like 2 weeks ago we got to see them. So we try to be as supportive to that family as we can. And that's been a real blessing of this whole foster care experience, I think, for us. So about a week or two, it wasn't very long after the kids were reunified, we received another call. We were kind of grappling with going forward and the loss of those two children and going through that again and allowing ourselves the time to heal. However, we received a phone call that there were two children, aged 2 and 4, both boys as well. That brothers. Yep, we were matched for their pre-adoptive home, and we thought about that a lot. But we knew that they were calling us. We were the ones that were supposed to take them, and truth be told, we already had an empty nest syndrome going on. So it was. We decided to go forward, and these two little guys have now been with us for a little bit over a year. And actually, this week we received termination of parental rights orders, and hopefully within the next 6 to 8 months, because it takes a really long time, we will be able to adopt these two kiddos, and they are just part of our family like they've never were not with us. Exactly. And our family, our friends, our whole community has brought them right in as a whole part of our family. And it's been such a wonderful and challenging, but
rewarding experience.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you both. Let's just take 15 to 20 seconds to just reverence April and Miles and the story that they've begun to break open for us. Now let's turn our attention to Kelly. Kelly is from Canton, Michigan. She and her husband historically were from a very traditional Catholic background, and she's engaged faith and religion very differently as she has lovingly accompanied her child as he has claimed his gender identity. So Kelly, we invite you to tell some of your stories.
Hi, my name is Kelly Elizondo, and I have a very non-linear story to tell. My husband and I are both attorneys, and we met when I was in my last semester of law school. He was at the prosecutor's office, and I was rotated through one of his courtrooms to observe. And this kind of goes along with Miles and April, how we felt a calling, and there was a synergy right away. My husband was doing a sentencing, and there were 10 small children sitting in the courtroom. And it was very unusual to have kids in the courtroom, because usually the courtrooms are empty and there's no spectators. So as I was listening to the argument, the attorney for the woman who was being sentenced was saying, "Your Honor, there are 10 good reasons why this woman should not be incarcerated." And he gave a spiel and sat down, and my now husband stood up and said, "Can I have the little guy second to the end? Can you stand up, please? Your Honor, I just wanted you to know that she was using that little guy as her drug courier." That's all I have to say. And I was sitting there like, wow, I am going to marry this guy. He is awesome. And my husband and I, then we started dating and got married. And we did get married in the Catholic Church. We were both raised Catholic. My husband Hispanic. I come from a French background. So two very Catholic families. So we were married in the Catholic Church. We had talked for quite some time about when we wanted to have kids. We're both very busy professionals. My husband is a lifelong prosecutor. I've done all kinds of different things since I went into practice in '91. And when I first started practicing in the '90s, it was very difficult to be an attorney and have a family. And so it took me a long time to decide that I even wanted to have children. So my husband and I decided to do an international adoption. Just like April and Miles were saying, we felt compelled and kind of called to give a home to somebody and give somebody a better life. So we chose to do a Russian adoption. Our child was assigned female and had been abandoned at birth. So mother gave birth in the hospital and then left. And we actually had to wait a year. So part of the legal system in Russia is that the family has a year to assert their rights. So our child spent 14 months in a Russian orphanage. And when I brought my child home from Russia, was chronologically 14 months old, but was the size and had the milestones of a 6-month infant. So here's my 14-month-old that is in infant clothing and is at the stage where we're trying to teach the child how to chew. We're like trying to catch our baby up to 14 months old. And it was just a real eye-opening experience for us. Being in the Russian orphanage was an eye-opening experience. Our child was in a big playpen all day. So when we went to the orphanage, the kids are in a playpen, and that's where they're set all day. At certain times of the day, they're taken out of the playpen, and it's like an assembly line. They're all lined up in their high chairs. They all open their mouths, tilt their heads back, and they're fed. They're all laid out in diaper changes. And when we got there, we didn't even know which child was ours. There were just a bunch of kids in a pen. And one child had mucus all over his face. One kid was pounding his head. One kid was just being stepped on because he was flaccid and couldn't move. Our little one was the most active of the group, was very, very active, but had no affect. So wasn't smiling, wasn't able to laugh. So we took our daughter home and we just smothered her with love right away. And we were really motivated to give our child the best of everything, as you can imagine. And we were amazed at the growth. I have a growth chart still on the hallway here. And our child went from like this big when they went home to like a couple months later, like this big. The growth and the acquisition of language was incredible. And one of the things we decided was really important to us was that our child have a Catholic education and be brought up in Catholicism. And so we had our child baptized. We sent our child to parochial school. And this is kind of the beginning of our journey. And when I had an opportunity to meet April Miles and Mary Kay the other day. And so I've had all week to kind of think about what I wanted to say. And one of the things that jumps out for me is a remembrance from when I was in the 3rd grade and I was in Catholic school. And we had an assignment to color. And it was a picture of Jesus with the halo. I'm sure you've all seen it. And there was an example the teacher had colored, and she had it up on the blackboard. And I got out an orange crayon and decided, wouldn't it be wonderful if I colored Jesus's color orange instead of the yellow the teacher did? And I remember coloring the orange and the teacher whipping over there, pulling my paper up, and in front of the whole class, this is not supposed to be orange. This is supposed to be yellow. And that, I think, goes a long way in saying what my programming was and how hard it has been for me to deprogram from that Catholic background. So I've got my child. I think this is the greatest thing in the universe that I've got my child in the Catholic school. They are going to flourish. They are going to do wonderful. And what I didn't realize, and I'm still trying to absorb, is that all of that Catholic dogma I grew up with is it's yellow. It is not orange. There is a right way and there is a wrong way. And when my child started struggling in about the 8th grade and ultimately came out to my husband and I as transgender in the 10th grade, we were not, oh, great, we'll work this out. We love you more than anything. We were both, what are you talking about? There's the right and the wrong, and they're not right. And we really made a tremendous amount of mistakes on our journey with our child. And we are still learning, and I still have a hard time when my child expresses things. I have a very intelligent, very expressive child. And when I say, oh, my teen did this, Mom, I'm not your teen, I'm your son. And so I get called out pretty much on a daily basis. And it really is a matter of trying to rewire my brain. Our child did make First Holy Communion and was in the full-on dress with the veil, the whole 9 yards. And I remember at the time, my mom and I being so excited, we wanted those pictures, the First Holy Communion, and my kid like, I can't believe you made me wear a dress and a veil. This is like the worst thing you could have possibly done to me. Why don't you just let me wear a suit? So it was very, looking back on it, I can see how difficult it was that we decided to send our child to a Catholic school because they had to wear the uniforms, and my child didn't want to be in the jumper, hated it, wanted to be in the polo shirt and the trousers, and had a really hard time because the Catholic school, this kind of goes along with what the keynote speaker was saying, My child, even though is Russian, is olive skin, dark hair, dark eyes, and the whole Catholic school was white. And all as white as me, and all, in their little Catholic boxes. And I really had kind of thrown my child to the wolves unintentionally without knowing it. We did ultimately switch our child to the public school, and my son sighed a big sigh of relief. The first day he came home from public school, he said, there was another brown kid there that looks just like me. Was absolutely thrilled that now his world had expanded. So his world is expanding. He's figuring things out. My husband and I are in our boxes, really not seeing anything. And we had to be hammered and hammered and hammered by our child before we got it. So it really has been quite an experience. I didn't feel love and support from what we thought was our Catholic family. When we would run into people after our child was in the public school, there was a family that we had been really close to. And, I was a full-time working attorney, and this family had always taken our son after school and was really close. And we had run into them, and we were so excited to see them. And my son and I went up, and it was like, oh, yeah, they were, hi, nice to see you. Oh, yeah, we'll have to get together. We'll have to follow each other on social media. And my son was all excited to see this little boy that he had spent so much time with in early elementary, and, did the friend request, nothing. Another little girl that my son had practically lived in their house from the Catholic school, same thing, ran into them at Lowe's, all happy to see them. My child went to friend them, no response. And recently I was invited to a grad party because now the kids have all graduated from high school. And my son said, Mom, I really don't want you to go because I really don't want you to have to be asked about me, because it was a friend from the Catholic school that had invited me to their daughter's graduation party. And my child was like, it's just going to be awkward, and I don't feel comfortable. They're not going to be accepting. If they ask you questions, you're going to have to say that I'm a boy now, and I don't think you're going to be able to handle it, and I don't think it's going to go well. So this has really affected us, and it's really affected my child's view of religion and spirituality. And the fact that they're in the Catholic school and they're teaching you the golden rule, but the golden rule only applies to those who are just like you. It doesn't apply to people who are different races, creeds, or sexual orientations or gender orientations. So I've spent a lot of time trying to deprogram myself and become more accepting and loving. And that goes for my child and all of my child's friends. So it's just been quite a journey, and I'm really honored to be here with this wonderful panel and be able to speak to you today.
Thanks, Kelly. And again, let's just take like 15 to 20 seconds to hold Kelly and her son in prayer, reverencing their story. And now we turn our attention to Ricky. Ricky lives in Southern California, and she and her ex-wife co-parent an 11-year-old child. Ricky will be speaking of some of the legal, religious, familial, and school challenges of being recognized as her daughter's parent. Welcome, Ricky.
Thank you, Mary Kay. So in thinking of the challenges of being a queer parent, I thought of the times when I've made and kept with me the domestic partnership certificate from California, along with the civil union paperwork from New Jersey and the marriage certification from Massachusetts, and then the federal recognition of all of it, which when getting divorced actually was a process of getting divorced in 3 different states and then nationally. And the times when driving cross country, I've plotted the course to only go through states where I had legal protection to see my child or wife at the time if we got in an accident. We changed our names as a family so that even if I wasn't acknowledged as a parent, perhaps they would think of me as a relative and allow me to have some say or some legal recognition again. And then I thought of the school challenges. My daughter, who's in 6th grade now, Carrie, she's had to switch classes twice now because of some homophobic teachers. And we've lived in LA, Western Massachusetts, New Jersey, places that are very friendly or supposedly friendly, but we've still run into trouble. In kindergarten, I remember her coming home one day and crying because the teacher gave her an assignment to draw her mother and father, and had been talking in school about genetics, that the mother and father cow or whatever it was had kids and the kids looked like both of them. And she argued with the teacher and said she didn't have a father. And we spoke with the teacher and said, and just educating her, you could say that, the male and female, because yes, everybody does have male and female genetic material, but, to be broader in terms of the books you read and the way you're thinking, the language that's being used. So that's been consistent. Same with paperwork where they say mother, father. Where do I put my name? And working with schools and organizations, mental health, everything, to have a lot of that rewritten. Most of it has not been out of hate, it's just been out of ignorance. But then truly the largest challenge I've had is feeling like a secondary parent or a non-parent. So I say my daughter, but the idea of her being mine, because I'm not genetically related to her, has been really a struggle, both from my own internal perspective, but then also the way that other people label me and interact with me. It started even just with conception, which was the decision of whose genetics, me or my wife at the time, whose were better. And hers were dubbed better, as being better to pass on to a child. When pregnant, she got a lot of attention. I didn't get any because I wasn't visibly pregnant. My father at one point actually told me that I wouldn't love my daughter as much as a real daughter because I wasn't genetically related to her. So it was the differential between me and my wife, the recognition of her versus me. We chose to have a home birth because the hospital wouldn't put me on the birth certificate. And this, again, New Jersey, 2009. I had to adopt her to become her legal parent. It took me 2 years to adopt her because I couldn't handle psychologically the idea that I had to adopt my own child and her other mother didn't. I'm consistently asked at school when we both show up, like, oh, who's the mom? Who's the parent? And they always look at my ex because they look the same. My ex and my daughter look very similar. And so no one knows what to do with me. I have to prove the legal recognition every time I sign her up for school. My ex does not, because again, they look the same and they're biologically related. A lot of this is internal, but in terms of external, she was not recognized as my child through the church because of course our marriage isn't recognized and she's not my birth child, though that's been changing bit by bit. Same with family issues of her not really being, quote, mine. We even had, trouble in the marriage that developed because of my jealousy of the treatment my wife was getting and how close she and my daughter were. She had her 9 months by herself when pregnant and I didn't. She breastfed and I couldn't. So that was really hard on the relationship as well. And then internally, whenever Carrie would be upset with me or, not want me to give the bath, but her other mom to give the bath, of course, I internalize and see that as, well, she she doesn't like me as much. She doesn't see me as a mom. And sometimes I think that was true because their personalities are more similar. And other times I think that's just the load that I was carrying, and continue to carry and really struggle with, is how much is she my daughter, when often the first question I get, even from lesbian parents, is, oh, did you adopt her or did you give birth? Who's the birth mother? I get that question a lot. Who's the birth mother? And I think to myself, does it matter? If you're asking me, it means it must matter. And then it just reinforces my own worry that maybe I'm not as much of a mother. So that for me has been the biggest struggle through these years, and is overlaid on all of the other legal, social, educational, safety pieces, and church issues that are there as well. I find solidarity recently in Joseph, because he also adopted and raised a child from conception that wasn't his. And so I find some comfort in going to Joseph for understanding and solidarity. And thank you, Mary Kay, for inviting me, and Kelly and April and Miles for sharing your stories too.
Thanks, Ricky. And again, let's take 15 to 20 seconds to just hold Ricky and her daughter, Carrie, in reverence and heart and prayer. So we're going to move into a Q&A time period, and we've got a few questions that I have already. So we'll start with some of those questions as we wait for you all to share your questions. So again, go to the Q&A tab to the right of your screen and feel free to start interacting, asking your questions, and affirming questions that others are offering. So April and Miles, thank you again for your story and for your willingness to be part of this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Miles, when we met last week, you talked about some of the unique challenges that you've had in navigating the adoption system while transitioning. Mm-hmm. Can you speak more to that in this context here? And what have been some of the challenges for both of you in that, and how are you navigating them?
Thank you for the question. The whole process of transitioning is pretty new to me in general. I've known that I was non-binary for several years, and then a couple of years I've been out as non-binary, but it's only been in the past year or so that I've been identifying as transmasculine. And I changed my name to Miles. I believe it was the beginning of January this year, from my birth name. And that process overall went pretty well. It was sort of my way of coming out to my coworkers, my family, and my friends. But I still held these reservations about the safety of coming out in other settings, primarily ones where people didn't know me as intimately as, our church family knows us, and, my friends and family know me. So a little bit of a challenge has been, what is safe to disclose in terms of being a foster parent? And, one of the very first questions I got from family members when I came out to them as Miles was, this isn't going to mess up the adoption, is it? And it wasn't meant to be a hurtful comment. Really, I saw it as real concern. These are people that love our children. They're, part of the family. And with the heartbreak of the two other children we took care of moving on, there was a lot of fear, and still is fear, about losing these children who everyone's just come to love so much. So what I decided to do was sort of keep my birth name in my interactions with the foster care system. And it's been a little tricky. For me, it's been just to remind myself to be careful and to be guarded. We did make a decision to foster through the state system. And even though, New Hampshire tends to be more conservative, I do think I'd be, pretty safe. I don't think it'd be very legally permissible for them to say, oh, you're transgender, never mind. But I still just have this fear of discrimination and just, feeling othered by these folks who see us as really capable parents. I don't trust that they may not think differently about me and about April too. And I want to give her an opportunity to share what it's been like for her.
I mean, I think that you explained a lot, but definitely we're in New Hampshire, where we think Southern New Hampshire is a little bit more progressive, and we hope that it wouldn't affect anything. But there definitely is that worry, and even with the best of times with a cis couple, there is the fear that the parents may be reunified last minute, or a family member may come up last minute,
or that they'll object to their children living forever with an LGBTQ family or parents.
Right. So in general, within the system, no matter what the makeup of the family is, there's reservation and fear. So then we add this extra element to it. And one of the things, Miles' appearance is pretty much the same at this point. However, Miles' name is different. And so that is a little bit challenging for me, going back and forth. I'm used to calling Miles now and using their correct pronouns. And when we have the social workers come, or we're speaking to other people within the state, I have to kind of flip my identity in a way, and it feels kind of fake. I have to go back to using Miles' birth name, and it is challenging, and I have slipped up, and I was kind of like looked at Miles, and we just kind of
carried on,
hoping that there wouldn't be any questions. So that has been a little challenging. It even comes down to something as simple as an email address that you use, or your phone message on voicemail. My mom asked just the other day, well, you haven't updated your voicemail message yet. And that's exactly why, as it comes down to that fear that something may happen.
And, the process with the kids has been pretty smooth, luckily. I mean, they have known me as, someone whose gender is not, black and white since they met me, which has been nice. But they do run into those questions, like on Father's Day. I was the person that got that, the little nice coloring and the, what are Dad's favorite things and stuff. And they had crossed out Dad and written Baba on it. And it was really sweet. It's just it's a process of navigating, what inside our family home is what's right and what feels good to us, and what other people make of it, really. Like, just like Ricky was saying, with her experience as a parent. So.
And also helping our children, I think, navigate this time as well, because they now know Baba as Miles. And I was talking about Miles one time at a play date, and the little boy that was playing with our son said, "Who's Miles?" And he goes, "Oh, it's my dad." So it's like, what's comfortable for them, and what is, but it was kind of nice to just, it was no big deal. He just kind of like moved on, and that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Kelly, you've talked about needing to retrain your brain and thought processes to eliminate negative messages that you inherited from the institutional church. And I'm wondering what helped you do that, and what advice do you have for someone who's internalized in some way some of the horrible language, whether that's intrinsically disordered or other language that's used in the institutional church structures?
Yeah, I was very resistant to admitting that I had an LGBTQ child, very resistant. And my child had a lot of issues with self-harm, with suicidal ideation. And we were in a situation where the police had been called, they responded to our house, and the police officer was talking to my child in one room and my husband and I in the other. And my child had given their name and had given the male name. And I was talking to the police officer and I said, well, that's not really the correct name. It's this name. And it's not really a boy, it's a girl. And the officer was very well trained and very compassionate and said, well, you know, might be that your child's transgender, might not be, but here is, I'm going to give you this card for, we have an organization called PFLAG in the community. And you might want to give them a call. You know, you might find it helpful. So I took the card, and after they left, I said, yeah, no way, screw that. And I put the card aside, but, you know, he tripped something in my brain. And I kept thinking about it and kept thinking about it and kept thinking about it. And ultimately, I went online and kind of looked the local chapter up and hemmed and hawed. And then finally I sat down and wrote an email and said, hi, I'm a parent of a child that's just come out as transgender and I'm really struggling. You know, what could you offer me? And the wonderful people at the PFLAG Plymouth Canton chapter responded immediately. The president, George Belvich, who's just a wonderful person. I remember getting the email back that said, oh, I'm sorry, I was mowing the lawn when you emailed initially, so I'm sorry to get back to you right away, but we're having a meeting this Sunday, and you'll be hearing from another person from PFLAG. And the second email I got was from someone who I now consider a dear friend, Lori Mayers from Plymouth Canton PFLAG, who has a child who is LGBTQ. And when I went to that first meeting, I remember, and I'm not shy, I'm very outgoing. So when I went to the first meeting, they were showing a film. And I remember the film really touched me. I don't even remember what it was, but I remember watching it. And that point, my brain did start to open up, and I did start to see that it's not like I always thought. There isn't the right way and the wrong way. There's a lot of different ways. And the more I opened up and talked to the people at PFLAG, I think the better things have become. First of all, it made me feel a lot better, because then I saw that it's not just me. Because I remember at one point thinking, why is God doing this to me? Like, what does he have against me that he is making my child transgender? This is like so horrible. And being at those meetings and seeing other parents say, I love my child and it's okay, we navigate it, it's all good. All of a sudden, I started feeling like this calmness, like, okay, you know what? This isn't the big catastrophe that I thought it was. And ironically, one of the first things I did was about, I don't know, I think I'd only been to one meeting and I'd only been there for a couple weeks. And I called up George and Lori and said, do you guys have a support group for teens? Because I really feel like my teenager needs a support group, because now I've got you guys and my teenager doesn't have anybody. And they said, well, you know, there's this center out in Ferndale, which is about an hour away, and there's this place, but there was nothing in our community. So I said, well, do you think you could help me set up an organization for teenagers here? And next thing you know, I got my son involved, and we set up this. We now have a program in Plymouth Canton run by the Township of Canton's youth programming leisure services called Transpire. And they meet every Wednesday night, and it's a social educational group for LGBTQ kids and their allies. And these teens have a blast at this program. They did such a fantastic job. And our local PFLAG, we advertise it, we get the word out about their meetings, but they had already been trained in how to deal with LGBTQ kids. So they had all this expertise that they weren't using. And when we came to them and asked them if they wanted to do this program, they were like, yay, we've been looking to do this. And so all of a sudden I started feeling like I was finding my purpose. And it was really eye-opening to me. Like, my purpose wasn't lawyer, super adoptive mom to, you know, this Russian that I saved. It was, I've got a lot of growing and learning to do, and I need to start getting it out into my community. I need to start making things better for not just my kid, but other kids. And I really think it's made me a much, much, much better person to be involved in all this. After we got that going, I arranged to have our first LGBTQ Christmas tree in our area, which, you know, might not sound like much, but to have in our public park the walk of trees where everybody in the community is going through, to have an LGBTQ tree that was decorated by children and homemade ornaments that the kids thought of was really, I mean, it was just felt so good to do that. And now I do a lot of volunteer activities. I got involved in advocating at the school district for a transgender policy, which they actually passed in December of 2020. So it actually went into effect before my son graduated in the spring this year. So my advice to anybody that's really struggling is find whatever organization is getting you out of the house and around other people and getting you involved and making you do things that are outside your comfort level, because the more you do it, the more it's not outside your comfort level, and the better you feel about yourself, about your family, about your child. And it brings so much education that you just were unaware of. You learn so many things, and it honestly started to deprogram my brain, and I'm still working on it. And I'm very involved with PFLAG. I'm now the coordinator for the entire state, and I joined PFLAG in 2019. So I like barreled in. So I really, really enjoy PFLAG, and it has helped me tremendously. And I know there's a lot of organizations and groups out there, so I strongly encourage people to find theirs and to just don't think about it. Just jump in feet first and just go with the flow.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Ricky, you've seen a lot of legal and societal challenges just in the 11 years of Carrie's lifetime. What do you envision life could be, should be, might be by the time Carrie has her own children? What would you like to see different and easier and more beautiful?
I think the three words, the future, what it could be, should be, and might be, that there are three different answers. What it could be such that that she doesn't need to educate others about social justice, about rights, about the way different families look. I can see how it could be that. There is a lot of training, there's PFLAG, there's more openness in movies and discussions and such, that this is a topic, whether people are, what side of the spectrum they lie on in terms of support, at least there's knowledge of it. So I think we could get there. What should it be? It should be that this question never needs to be asked. What might it be? Given, you know, the keynote speaker and the white supremacy and the direction that our country seems to potentially be going in, it might not be any different from today. And my fear truly is that it might be worse. For example, when California first had marriage, San Francisco, the mayor of San Francisco signed a bill for same-gender couples to get married. Many, many did, in the mid-2000s. And then the state rescinded. And none of those marriages were allowed to count. So even legal progress that we've made can be reversed. So that might be my fear of what it might be. Yeah, so three different questions. And I know that my daughter has already been discriminated against, like I said, with teachers and education and such, filling out forms, that we still have Mother and Father's Day and we don't have Guardian Day for the kids that are raised by grandparents or foster parents or whatever other family that it looks like. And that we've had multiple families who will allow her to come over to play, but their kids aren't allowed at our house. And again, that's living in very liberal environments. So I hope it changes. It could change. It might or might not. But my dream would be that the question you just asked me when my daughter's my age won't even have to be asked.
We've got several questions that have come in from the audience. So let's just start with the first one. Marianne Duddy Burke asks, what do you think are the most important things that can be done to counter gender binaryism and heteronormativity and how families are conceptualized?
For me, I'm cisgender, and although have worked and trained school districts and mental health professionals on gender identity and non-binary, started groups and support groups. And one thing that I have seen is forms. And it's sometimes an easy change, that we stop genderizing forms, that we stop having people fill out circles that say male and female. And that can be a subtle difference, but it can educate the system that change needs to be made.
We recently registered our kids for school, and I would agree with that. A lot of, I think, folks are starting to think in that direction. You'll see parent rather than, mother, father. But I looked everywhere on every single one of those forms for school, daycare, and before and after school care, and not in a single place did it say, what do you want to be called? I know it's a little thing, but it would be nice if my son says, oh, my Baba is going to pick me up, that they'll know what that means, first of all. And second of all, that if they're like, who's Baba? He could say Miles and they'd be like, oh, I get it. He sees a therapist, and a couple months ago, we picked him up and he said, oh, Baba, and greeted me. And his therapist said, oh, you're Baba. I thought that was his stepfather. I'm like, no. And why didn't you ask us who Baba is? Like, you shouldn't assume, And I hope that, one day we won't have to explain ourselves quite so much. But again, I think, those forms and the way that, these community organizations greet people could really change. And that allies can be a big part of, speaking up for, like Ricky's daughter and her co-parent, and, for people of all genders. That would be helpful.
I think one of the things that we're starting to see that as it evolves is becoming more helpful, counterintuitively, is corporations changing the way they're marketing I think back to when my son was in early elementary school and the struggle of going to the toy store and, okay, you're a little girl, so here's the girls section. Or we would go shopping for clothes and then, well, here's the girls section. And, at that point, I was so programmed, like I would go straight to the little girl section and my son would turn around and go, I don't like that stuff. I like this over here. And he points to the little boys section. And I really struggled because, in my mind, I'm like all about the pink frilly dresses. And why should my kid feel, first of all, why should my opinion matter? I mean, I'm seeing that now. Why should my opinion matter? My child should be comfortable wearing whatever they want to wear. So they're even like having the boys and girls section for small children sends a huge, huge message. So when some of these corporations start to do the gender neutral thing, the clothes are gender neutral, the toys are gender neutral, that actually does have a very profound effect on people's habits and the way that they're interacting with their children. If I had, gone to the store when my child was 5 and there had just been a children's section and my child could have just gone in there and picked things out, that would have alleviated so much stress and pressure I was putting on my child to like steer them away from the Marvel comic t-shirt because, you're going to be the only girl dressed like that. It just like to just let them go, pick out what they want and not have to worry about what I think or what the teacher thinks or what the other kids in the classroom are going to think. What a gift. So I really like the trend of seeing more, it's for kids. It's not for little boys or not for little girls, it's for kids. And I think the more we see that in society and the more we start actually internalizing that message so that when we say you can wear whatever you want, you can be whatever you want, we all really mean it.
We've got another question here from Melly Barber. And she asks, we've talked a lot of challenges. I'm wondering if there are also some unique strengths, joys, gifts of raising an LGBTQI child or parenting as an LGBTQI person.
I have the most confident kid in the room. My LGBTQ child is articulate, intelligent, can research the heck out of anything, is uber talented, and can go into any room and command attention. So I think it's a real strength that my child is unique, knows it, and doesn't feel bad about it, and can really go out there and be their own person. I think that is something that is going to carry my child very far in life, that they had enough courage to say, even though they knew that mom and dad were like not really on board, but still felt comfortable enough to at least come to us and say, I'm transgender. And even though we say and do the wrong thing all the time, still hang in there with us and still go out in the world. I mean, my son works, goes to college, and really just takes on life and whatever comes his way and really handles himself well. And that's a good example for me of resiliency and opening myself up to people that maybe I wouldn't have before. And it helps a lot with the prejudice and stereotypes that we're all grow up with. So now when I'm out and about and I see somebody that looks different from me, whether that's their hair is glowing orange or they've got sleeve tattoos, whereas maybe 10 years ago, I'd be like, I don't know. Now I'm like, hey, how are you? What's up? I just naturally just see them as a person now. And I think that has been a true gift of having an LGBTQ child that would not have happened if I did not have my child.
I would say one of the gifts and joys of being an LGBT parent, and we've grown to realize that the pressure of being a parent, I feel, is decreased in a way that we can let our children kind of be who they want to be. We discuss gender and all different kinds of topics, and families, and the makeup of different families. And even if there's a different element to it, because our children are a little bit more in tune, at least the older one, that there are different types of families, since he has transitioned in and out of different families. And just being able, it's a joy to think that these minds that we're working with are hopefully what our future is going to be. So when you asked Ricky the question about what will the future be like, hopefully, this will help create our future, that we don't have to go by what maybe a straight family may feel for the pressures of, my son needs to be masculine and not to cry, and all those other cultural norms. Yeah.
And for me, this is pretty new to me, but I hope that a gift I can give my children is and that April will give too, is just to live our lives the way God meant us to. And, when it's scary, to do the best we can, and teach our children that even when it's hard, it's worth it to be yourself, because, that makes you whole. And that, even if other people don't believe that that's the way things should be, that you will know that that's how God wants it to be.
And similarly, I've found that my daughter is much more conscientious of social justice issues and more sensitive to children making fun of others for being different, and will stand up for that, and has since she was young. So I think seeing the experience of her mother's struggle, and then also her own, has led her to be much more conscientious of the system and much more willing to advocate to change it than I was when I was 10 or 11. It took me many years in my own coming out and recognizing my difference and discrimination to get to that point. Because she's grown up with it, that's her frame of reference. And I think she will have more time in her life to be a mover and a changer, extra decades that I didn't have, because it took me longer to get to that point.
We are in our final 6 minutes, so just a time check. But we have two questions that kind of relate to each other. One is asking more like, have you, it's specifically addressed to Ricky, but I think there's ways that it can apply to all. Have you found ways to meet other parents who have some similar parental experiences, who could be a means of support for you? And the other question gets at, what should an organization like Dignity USA be doing to support your families? So lumping them together, it is, what are the support systems out there, and what are the gaps in the support systems for families?
I really appreciate the question, because those support systems do exist, especially in the areas that I've lived in. However, I have never been one who has been really active within the gay community in terms of friends or church life or anything like that. I am just always been part of a more generic community. So it is in order to get support, I have had to be within a lesbian-only community, but that's not a natural fit for me. So sometimes that actually does feel uncomfortable. And however, they do exist. One of the issues is that they're so small. Even Western Mass, the parents group, we had 3 couples, and that was it. Western Massachusetts. Santa Barbara, there were 4 couples in the city. So just finding people is hard. And in terms of dignity, one of the pieces that feels so supportive to me is when allies advocate for change, that it's not just me and the 3 queer couples that are going to the schools trying to educate, or going to the library to put out a kids display on different families, but when my mother-in-law and her heterosexual friends went to their library and put out a display and had the kids come. So that has really been where I have seen the support, is when there are others that don't have an individual vested interest, but are still making so much effort for the justice and equality.
Well, April, Miles, Kelly, Ricky, we offer you words of gratitude, words of love, words of affirmation. Thank you very much for spending this time with us and sharing your stories of family, stories of love, stories of challenge, stories of hope. Your stories enrich us all, help us see where some of the gaps are, and help us envision a path toward a better, brighter tomorrow. So know of our love and prayer for you and your families. Know of our desire to be a supportive presence in your life, and know of our gratitude for your willingness to take this time with us today. With that, I think the invitation is to move back to the main session, and this is where I'm filling as the facilitator. I should know when the next event starts, and I didn't take notes on that. So
I believe the next event's at 5:30.
All right, 5:30 would be Eastern time, so that would be in 2 minutes. So yes. If you go back to the reception area, you can find the tabs for the next session opening. Thank you all for joining this workshop. And again, Ricky, April, Miles, Kelly, thank you for sharing with us.